of life and hope dwelling in humankind and in the web of being that surrounds us. We turn our minds and hearts again toward Thee, source of all becoming. We awaken again to the mysteries that humble us, the realities that orient us, the truths that judge and guide us, the beauty that informs and ravages us, the love that nurtures us, the fellowship that sustains us, the creativity that heightens and deepens and reorders our living, as we give ourselves in honesty and openness to the larger life before us. Amen.
Is called Finding Shelter in the Storm by Brene Brown. You're in it. That warm wash of not good enough has taken over. Doesn't matter how you get into shame, the trick is getting out in one piece without sacrificing your authenticity. As a shame researcher, I know that the very best thing to do in the midst of a shame attack is totally counterintuitive. Practice courage and reach out. But here's the tricky part about sharing your story. You can't call just anyone. If you share your shame story with the wrong person, he or she can easily become one more piece of flying debris in your already dangerous shame storm. We want solid connection in a situation like this, something akin to a sturdy tree firmly planted in the ground. When we're looking for compassion, we need someone who is deeply rooted, is able to bend, and most of all, embraces us for our strengths and struggles. We need to honor our struggle by sharing it with someone who has earned the right to hear it. When we're looking for compassion, it's about connecting with the right person at the right time about the right issue. We need a move a body friend. A year or two ago, my good friend called, and as soon as I said hello, she said, "You're a friend who would move a body." I could tell by her voice that she was serious. I lowered my voice and whispered, "What does that mean?" She said that one of her sister's close friends had called her sister and asked her to help her move her mom. The friend's mother, who was apparently only invited to visit once a year, struggled with alcoholism. When my friend's sister's friend came home from work, her mother was passed out drunk on the sofa. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the kids would be busting through the front door any minute. She called because she physically needed help moving her mother. I let out a deep sigh and said, "Yes, you could definitely call me." Then she said one of the kindest things that anyone has ever said to me. She explained, "I'd call you because you would come right away, give me a hug, never look judgmental or disapproving or disgusted. And then you'd say, 'Let's do this.' The next day, when you saw my mom at the park or the soccer game, you'd be kind and respectful. And most of all, it would never cross my mind to say something to you like, 'Please don't tell anyone.' You don't do that." I thought about that conversation for days. I thought about how lucky I am to have a couple of move-a-body friends in my life. I thought about how crazy it is that most of us can steamroll over these friends while we work to win the approval and acceptance of people who really don't matter in our lives, people whom we'd never call when we were in a real struggle, when we're in the shame storm. About a week after this call, I thought I'd pay the kindness forward, and I called my friend Dawn. As soon as she answered, I said, "You're a friend who'd help me move a body." She replied, "Holy crap, did you kill somebody?" I laughed. "No, not today." Then I told her how much she means to me and how grateful I am to find shelter in her friendship.
Our video. A few weeks back, I was really feeling the struggle of the pandemic. And I'm sure many of you have realized by now that pandemic fatigue comes in waves. There are moments it really gets to you, and you decide, you know what? Today I'm going to start binge watching all 300 plus episodes of Cheers on Hulu. And then it goes away for a while. And then when you're done binging Cheers 2 weeks later, it's back again. No, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but my point is that that feeling of ennui that has been with us for this past year comes and goes. I was riding one of those waves. I could feel that some of you were too. It had been a week with a number of calls and concerns. It was cold, it was dark, democracy was under attack. And I was writing my weekly e-news article that week, and I felt like I hadn't said everything that needed to be said, that I hadn't quite addressed the real spiritual and emotional needs of the congregation in that moment. And so I wrote one sentence that I hoped would fix all of the random existential anxiety that was floating through me and throughout our congregational system. And in order to buoy spirits, I wrote at the very end of my article, "Keep on truckin'." I deleted that sentence about 5 seconds after I wrote it. What was I thinking? I can't end an e-news article with the line, "Keep on truckin'." I'll sound like the biggest doofus on the face of the planet to my congregation. Have some pride, man. They'll think you got that Reverend Doctor title off the internet or something. Well, later on, I was talking to one of my move-a-body friends, as Brene Brown would call them. And I said, I cannot believe I nearly wrote "Keep on trucking" at the end of an e-news article. That was so silly of me. And he said, you know, what's so silly about it? That's a perfectly fine sentiment at this moment in this pandemic. People need to feel a little boost to keep going. Keep their resilience strong to, well, keep on trucking. And this got me thinking. Did I not write "Keep on trucking" because it wasn't a sentiment that people needed to be said within the church? Or did I not write it to avoid looking foolish? Was it about me, or is it about you, the people of the congregation? Put in those terms, I clearly needed to rethink this whole thing. Thus, the title of my sermon today, and to some degree, what I'm wearing, reflect my new attitude. Now, as shame storms go, this was a pretty mild one, but because it was fairly benign, maybe that's what makes it possible for me to tell you about it. If it was some kind of super duper vulnerable issue for me, then it might be hard for me to preach about it, and frankly, might be hard to listen to. So let's use a small shame storm as our case study, sort of, for this morning, our example. I believe that if we could get backstage view into the minds of other people, it would look something like this. All of us have two walls that we hang things on. One is our wall of fame. And this is the wall we introduce to people when we first meet them. This is the wall we talk about a lot when we interview for a job or we go out on a first date. Why, yes, there on the wall, you can see which school I graduated from, how much money I have, the car I drive, what papers I've published, how many languages I speak, how many books I've read. We all put something different on our wall. They're unique to each and every one of us. So I might put up there how many comic books I own or how many times my football team has won the Super Bowl. These are all true statements. They're not necessarily lies. They're true statements about ourselves, but they're the things we kind of want to impress people with, how we want them to remember us. But like Dorian Gray's portrait, there is something else hanging up that we desperately do not want people to see. These are the things that we are not proud of. They're the things we try to hide from the outside world. Indeed, hung on this wall are things that we may not have looked at ourselves in a very long time. For this other wall is our wall of shame. And I'm going to be very careful about listing things here. There could be all kinds of stuff that we're ashamed of, even if it isn't deserving of shame. One of my best friends in elementary school was a Latino kid who desperately concealed that his parents didn't speak English. When you were a kid in elementary school, that was a big deal, or at least it was to him. Another example might be growing up poor. A gay friend of mine told me that the process of coming out of the closet was a process of choosing to hang his sexual orientation on his wall of fame instead of hiding it on his wall of shame. He went from being ashamed of who he loved to being proud of it. So this is some super heavy stuff. I didn't want to sound like a doofus in the E-news. But why not? If that's a message people legitimately needed to hear that week, why cling to my pride and ego? There's a great book, one of the best Buddhist books I think I've ever read, actually, by the Tibetan Buddhist master Chogyam Trungpa. A controversial figure, but absolutely vital to the process of Tibetan Buddhism coming to America. And he wrote a book called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. To Chogyam Trungpa, the point of religion or spiritual practice or what have you is to let go of our sense of ego. So many of our troubles in the world happen because we cling too strongly to this sense of me and mine and not yours. And over time, we have kind of an overinflated sense of possessiveness and competition with others that is unwarranted. And while one might critique something like capitalism or communism with this perspective, Trungpa points his finger at religion itself. He says so often we use religion as a means to bolster our ego rather than letting go of it. Look at me. I can do Zen meditation for 30 minutes in a full lotus position without moving. I can hold this complicated yoga pose longer than anyone else in class. I can pray the rosary better than you can. I've gone to more social justice rallies than you have. I am a cardinal. I am president of the UUA. I have an REV in front of my name. That is spiritual materialism. When we use religion and spiritual practice to bolster our ego rather than taking it apart. In other words, we like to hang things like that, like how many yoga poses or something we can do on our wall of fame. But that's not the reason for religion. That's not the purpose of spiritual practice. The purpose is, and I dare say it always will be, to get us to look at and possibly address the stuff we've hung on our wall of shame. Religion serves its purpose best when it helps us to carefully and gingerly cut through our spiritual materialism and look at the real work, the stuff that we are ashamed of, the stuff that makes us vulnerable and therefore either afraid or angry. Fear and anger are kind of the twin guardians that stand on either side of our vulnerable places and come out when that vulnerability is threatened. And when they do come out, it is what Brene Brown calls a shame storm. Incidentally, racism, white privilege, even white supremacy usually lives on our wall of shame. We don't like other people seeing that stuff, and we most assuredly don't like to get called out on it. It's one of those vulnerable places we keep hidden and we don't want to talk about. And when someone does bring up racism or white supremacy, the reactions can range from denial and disengagement to anger and defensiveness. And that's exactly why we need to talk about those issues at church. They are our soft, tender places, but they also hold us back from our fullest potential and growth, both as individuals and as a faith tradition. By acknowledging that those unpleasant feelings about race do in fact exist somewhere, it's the necessary first stage for the work of anti-racism to begin. We can get past our personal hangups and are then freed to work toward greater justice in society. Just by the by, in terms of a random example, the first reaction to such a shame storm is to run and hide. Don't be around other people. Don't talk to them. There were moments during my sabbatical where I had feelings like this. I avoided friends and colleagues in ministry and felt judged by them, even though they had not given me any reason for me to feel like they had judged me, and I had no reason to feel judged. In reading about Brene Brown, I started following her advice. I kind of made it a New Year's resolution to reach out and talk to old friends that I had not heard from in ages. All of us are kind of hunkered down in our respective pandemic bunkers. Some of my friends had left ministry altogether. Some were thriving. Most were weathering things a little better or maybe a little worse than I was. But at any rate, it had been revitalizing, reaching out and hearing other people's experiences. I found that I have a few more move a body friends than I thought I did because I gave them a chance. I think as we near the 1 year mark of the pandemic, it's good to think about, who am I still connected to? Who sees me for who I really am and does not judge me? Who doesn't judge me for hoarding toilet paper, or binge watching Star Trek The Next Generation, or gaining weight, or having less money, or having to be more creative and having fun when things are closed? The pandemic made a lot of wall of shame items more visible to the world. Not everyone handles that well. The people who can reach out to others to weather the shame storms tend to be the ones who are happier. Isolation is the breeding ground for shame, Brown tells us, and nothing isolates us like hunkering down during the pandemic. One little bit of solace I found in the course of my own time in the pandemic was that song by the Mountain Goats, This Year. Kind of sums up this year that we've had living through these times, I think. I'm going to make it through this year if it kills me. The song describes a kind of moment of panic and fear and dread, but also coupled with anticipation of celebrating when it's over. I'm not saying that I've lived every moment of the past year in panic and dread. Like I say, that comes in waves. But I heard that song by the Mountain Goats kind of early on in the pandemic, one of my first low points, and I've come back to it again and again when one of those waves of ennui kind of wash over me. There is hope. There will be feasting and dancing in Jerusalem and everywhere next year. And so 1 year into this pandemic, my message to all of you is a simple one. Keep on trucking. I don't care if it sounds silly or foolish. It's what we all need to do to keep going. The way we get through this year, the way we've gotten through this year with the pandemic, is to keep on trucking. Keep doing what you have to in order to get by. Obviously, there are healthy ways to react, good habits we can build in, and there's not so good habits we can have. But you know what? I'm not going to tell you to just do the healthy ones. We all know we should be exercising, not eating a sleeve of Oreos at a time, limiting ourselves to one beer or glass of wine, paying our bills on time, avoid watching reality TV. But you know what? If you got to break a couple of those things I just listed, you go ahead. We aren't all perfect. We can't be subject to the judgment of others, even and especially if those others reside inside our own minds as voices on our wall of shame telling us what to do. We have to do what we can. Now, hopefully, we rack up a few more healthy habits than the unhealthy ones. If you've eaten a sleeve of Oreos by yourself during the pandemic, take it easy on yourself. If you've kept super ultra mega vegan the entire time while running 6 miles a day and feel that you're better than the rest of us mere mortals, well, welcome to spiritual materialism. You're using spiritual practice as a means of bolstering your ego. Body-wise, it may be better, but pride and arrogance have their own caustic effects on the soul. Regardless of which path you take, it's just another way to keep on trucking. Stay strong, stay connected, stay resilient. We will make it through this year. One of my move a body friends is my sister Sarah. She and I have become close over the past couple of years. And one day I was over to her house and we were talking about life when she turned to me and asked, "Does your church know just how much of a hippie you are?" "Surely they do," I said. "Just look at the long hair and the beard." Sarah conveyed some skepticism. I was thinking about some of these issues at the time, kind of in the process of writing this sermon. And I said to myself, so is being a hippie on my wall of shame or on my wall of fame? Is my bias towards peace, love, and happiness something I hide because I'm ashamed of it? Or is it something I proudly display? I know you're well aware of my penchant for classic rock of that era. That's on my wall of fame for sure. But one of the key spiritual lessons of the pandemic for me has been, don't be ashamed of who you really are. Let it shine. And so I mentioned this to the worship committee. If I could wear tie-dye in our virtual pulpit, and I was told that I had to wear a tie-dye suit. So this is what I'm wearing today. Know that before you compose your emails to the worship committee. So this is the best I can give you, kind of coming out of the closet in a literal sense as a hippie. There you go. Nothing to be ashamed of. And it's in that spirit that I want to end this morning with the words from Jerry Garcia, lead man for the Grateful Dead. Jerry left this world for his reward many years ago, but his music lives on forever. And if Jerry were here with us in these days of the pandemic, looking back over everything that's transpired in this past year, I'd like to think he would remind us of that iconic line of his, "What a long, strange trip it has been." In fact, the name of the song in which he sings that line is called Truckin. When the shame storms of life hit us, let us reach out to others in those moments when we most want to crawl into ourselves. Let us hold each other in love and be slow to judge those who are doing all they can to get by. And as we remember the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic, let us always keep on trucking. I love you. Go in peace. Amen. At this time, let us join together and sing hymn number 169, We Shall Overcome. The words will appear on your screen. As I experience fear, let me look at the causes of fear within myself. As I feel pain, let me examine that within me which could cause pain. As I sense doubt, let me be aware of the ways in which my own knowledge seems unfulfilled. As I feel concern, let me explore my own involvement. As I encounter another, let me seek those things we share in common. As I seek love, let me know love for myself. Amen.